Oh man, the one benefit of quarantine is that it really lets me brush up on my theory.
Sheriff's Department, open up!
What? Oh, what is this? You can't do this to me! I have rights!
You think that matters?
What? That's yours?
Check, check. 1, 2.
We are good.
Nice.
Okay, welcome back
Welcome back
to the former Red Star Radio Show, now rebranded as Negotiated Management.
a podcast about militarized police and repression in the United States.
Yes. We would like to thank everybody for your patience after a long hiatus during the quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
We have finally, like star-crossed lovers, we have finally met each other again and been reunited to bring you our sultry voices. And what a long hiatus it has been. It seems as though we were the only thing keeping the tides of American police repression at bay, because with our show on hold, to just not tell you the truth of what's happening in the world, the police are now in full crackdown mode.
Well, yeah, America is essentially an occupation.
Yeah, I mean, they are a hostile force hell-bent on basically trampling every single right we have as citizens. But, I mean, I'm sure if you've
Our
kept
inalienable American rights to
Yes.
life, liberty, and property.
Exactly. I'm sure if you've been, unless you've been living under a rock, if you've been paying attention to the news, I'm sure you've heard about all the protests that have been met with police violence and brutality. Ironically, protests against American police brutality have been met with more police brutality. And our dear leader, Donald Trump, is only encouraging and inciting more violence. But it really goes to show that in times of need, in times of stress for our country, you really begin to see what government agencies and what groups of people are given the funding and equipment they need. And it's certainly not teachers. It's not healthcare workers or, therapists.
Remember when in New York, those nurses had trash bags over them?
Exactly, yeah. Nurses are working with trash bags, and yet somehow the pigs, 1312, the pigs can have all the equipment they need, all the rubber bullets, all the tear gas grenades, all the riot shields and gear and tanks that they need to do their job, which is oppressing the people, essentially. And in today's episode, we're going to go over, what the history of the police in America, the history of police brutality in America, and what really led to the militarization of the police.
Yeah, and the 1033 program, and how, why you woke up one day and you're like, why does that douchebag I know from high school is driving a tank in my backyard?
Mm-hmm. Why is he doing that? And what people let that happen?
Tank in my backyard. Mm-hmm. Sounds like a Bob Dylan song. If Bob Dylan was around now.
Who's driving a tank through my backyard?
Who's driving a tank through my backyard?
It's not me.
I don't have no tank.
I don't have a tank, but I can, but my neighbor Hank got a tank because he's a policeman.
Yeah, that's a good song. We should write it.
Something like that. Yeah, we should do that. All right, so let's go over it. Let's get started.
Yeah, to understand police violence in America and the militarization and military tactics, at least within the context of the American police and the American justice system, we got to go all the way back to 2001, 9/11.
Actually, before we go back that far, let's take it back to just last week in the Asbury Park protest, which you took part in. Like you told me it was a peaceful protest, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it was a peaceful protest for the entirety of the night. And then I think there was 100 stragglers left, as there always are, just standing their ground. The police were kneeling, and a couple of the police were hanging out with some guys in the crowd. They looked really nervous. At least the Asbury Park police did. And we talk about outside agitators in all of these protests around America, in Minneapolis, or people from New York that are outside agitators. In New York, where are your outside agitators from? In a city of or a metropolitan area of 14 million people, Hoboken Like people are coming from Hoboken to tear down Soho. Like, give me a break, de Blasio. But yeah, the cops in Asbury were from like Keyport, even Ocean County. And a majority of them were too. None of the Asbury cops were dressed in riot gear either. It's the sheriff's department, the state police. I'm surprised we didn't see any federal officers there. But in Lakewood, their protest, which happened a few days ago at this point, I think on Monday. No, today is Monday. I think on Thursday or Friday. Cops were dressing up as Hasidic Jews, I think that's what they're called, Hasidic Jews.
Hasidic Jews, yeah.
Yeah, there's another subset of Jews that live in Lakewood, but the ultra-Orthodox Jews. And you could tell, like a local newspaper put out a report that was like, look at these freshly shaven men with curls. Where the hell did these guys get their disguises? Because it was obvious that they were feds undercover in Lakewood.
Mm-hmm. But going back to Asbury Park, so the police were hanging around. Right, protest is basically ended. Just a couple of stragglers, and then what happened?
So gradually, more and more cops came out from the sheriff's department in riot gear, and as the protests grew or went on longer past the 8 p.m. curfew, which was preemptively put in. It also happened in Keyport, in Matawan, just a preemptive curfew. Everyone's got to go home or you're subject to arrest. But as the night grew on, all the cops kneeled, literally every single one outside the police department. So you had like 70 cops kneeling in front of these protesters. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all the cops left the group. All the cops were like, please go home. We really want you to be safe. Just please go home. They were like begging the crowd. And then on Monroe Avenue, right next to the post office, going across the tracks, all of a sudden you just see a line of like 100 riot cops from different departments. And then you look down, further down Monroe Avenue towards the shore, another line of cops. And then on Cookman, another line of cops coming from that area. Just a line of riot cops all of a sudden just coming out of nowhere to kettle people. And no one knew that this was happening because no one in the crowd was agitated or violent. And, beer burp. But as the cops moved in, everyone was saying, oh, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. And they engaged the cops. The cops started arresting people. I think some water bottles were thrown, but I think
water bottles.
Yeah, right. With the ultimate weapon. It's like he just threw a water bottle at us. Gun him down. Like those cops in Austin that just just opened fire on the crowd. But as the night, I think a cop got injured, but I'm pretty sure he just tripped and fell. And then all the cops were just like arresting journalists left and right. Some guy from the Asbury Park Press got arrested. I almost got arrested, but I was towards the side of the protest because my camera died just as the cops came up. Yeah, so I was like, oh shit, I gotta go try and find a battery in my pockets. And then the cop kind of chased me out with a bunch of other photographers. But you could see that they were only targeting the press. And they were only trying to get the press out of the protest. Because, one, they don't want to be seen enforcing curfew and, engaging in violence. But also, the press are always like in the front, and the press are always the one antagonizing the cops first. So that they immediately go after the press first because they're the one aspect or column of society that actually directly engages in constant agitation against police.
And monitoring.
Yeah, monitoring and agitation. And that's why they always go after the press first when they're arresting.
Yeah, which is actually different from how it used to be. I mean, back in the day, they would just leave the press alone. Mm-hmm. And that was actually good for them because even if the press took pictures of the police, beating someone up, as long as they were leaving the press alone, you could always at least have that excuse.
You could always spin the narrative. Look at those violent protests.
Exactly. But now that they're just arresting the press, which is the most neutral people that you could imagine, now there's no excuse for the police.
Yeah, it's just like, go away, you bastards.
Yeah.
Fuck 12.
So anyway, that is something that 30, 40 years ago, you could never imagine the police doing, especially to non-violent white protesters. But nowadays, they don't give a shit about that anymore. And in today's episode, we're going to explore how did that even happen and where did this history of police brutality, which has been always, start? and we're going to go all the way back to the 1919 Red Summer, I believe.
Right after World War One.
Right after World War One.
We can go back to 9/11 with the Patriot Act. And we can go back to the early 90s, late 80s with the war on drugs. Or we could even go back to the late 60s with the Black Panthers and the long, hot summer.
Yes.
But it goes even further back to the Red Summer of 1919. So in World War II, they started using tear gas. It was understood from the Hague Convention of 1899 that using non-lethal gases or irritants is totally legal and perfectly fine on the battlefield. But then they eventually moved on to like mustard gas and sarin gas and phosgene. Once World War I ended, there was a huge pandemic, the Spanish flu, that we're all so aware of now with COVID. And all the troops that came back, there was less economic opportunities for them. So there were a lot of strikes going on, like the coal miners' strikes.
Veterans demanding that the benefits that they got from the war, they get it now, essentially. Yeah.
America seems to have a history of just fucking over their veterans.
Fucking over their veterans and their workers. Yeah. So and these, not only that, this was the beginning of the IWW, the Wobblies, union strikes going on in America. And oftentimes, the police were usually the first group of people to be called in to break up the riots. And they would use tear gas, and they didn't have rubber bullets, so they just used batons to try and disperse crowds. And if that didn't work, then usually the National Guard would be called in. And they actually did not give a shit, and they would literally just shoot up crowds of people with actual bullets.
And then, towards the late 1880s, like they realized, these guys are shooting back. Or even in 1914 with
people.
Was
a lot
Blair
more people
Mountain
had guns back then.
In 1914?
Was there what?
Blair Mountain, Ludlow, where like the National Guard would just go and shoot up worker camps.
And, this is back when many more states had open carry. I mean, California was an open carry state until the 70s.
Yeah.
Which was until the Black Panther Party started using that to protect their own communities. And when open carry stopped benefiting just white, rich white people, suddenly...
Rich white conservatives.
Yeah, rich white conservatives.
Like, you can be, like after Lyndon B. Johnson, you can be black, but you can't be leftist and black. It's a little bit too far.
Yeah, exactly.
So as worker solidarity was growing after World War One, and race isolation was kicking in, more workers were being radicalized, and more workers were leaning to the left. So in like Seattle, you had general strikes. In New York, you had a lot of strikes, and once the blacks started striking, they grew. They had conflicts with white supremacists and the Ku Klux Klan, and that's actually what kicked off the the Red Summer. Was a murder in New York that ultimately escalated into a larger riot, which then grew and spread across the country in working class neighborhoods. And it wasn't at all like spread through like leftists or radicals. It was pretty tame in the ideological sense, where it was a sudden surge in these like working class sentiments that just exploded.
And these weren't even radical ideas. These were things like, maybe we should have a 5-day work week. And, we only work 40 hours, or we only work like 50 hours. And if we work more than that, you have to pay us. Really, by today's standards, things that we take for granted today were things that, workers had to die for 100 years ago.
Yeah. And I know the congressmen and legislators back then, in like 1919, this is right after the Russian Revolution, like these N-word Bolsheviks and anarchists are trying to destroy the country and usurp Christianity. And you see that like Tom Cotton today. It's like, these damn Antifa are trying to attack and dethrone God.
Yep. And it's always leftists who are trying to destroy the country, never conservatives.
Yeah, or even just regular working class people. The only reason why anyone would ever demand human rights or ever fight back against like expropriation of their labor or just plain
wage
old
theft.
wage theft or brutality would be because they're leftists
And they hate America.
and they've been co-opted by those damn Bolsheviks.
And they hate God.
Yeah, right. But it's never like, oh, well, maybe they just want more rights in the workplace.
Maybe they just care about people, you know.
Yeah, they don't want to be treated like shit. Yeah, I mean, you can see in this slide, like...
Are you talking about the one?
Yeah, the riots, again, break out. In National Capital, Marine kills N-word. I'm going to blur that out. Right?
Or, you know, and it's just talking about how, you know, the city detective was shot by a colored woman, as though that justifies it. You know, the fact that, you know, the army is being called in to fight back against civilian workers.
Yeah. And then in Omaha, the white vigilantes hung the mayor on like a lamppost outside City Hall.
I saw that.
It's like insane how it's just wild those white vigilantes were, those brown shirts.
Yeah, crazy
like
times.
In Seattle the other day, some dude tried to run his car through the crowd, and then a white supremacist did that in Bakersfield. And see the Boogaloo Boys, or the Boog movement, and the 3%ers now, like defending Walmart and Target, because Walmart's a pillar of the community.
Yeah.
Those guys on. Did you see the picture of the guys on top of GameStop with their sniper rifles?
Oh my god,
it's like
insane.
We will not let GameStop fall. Gamers rise up. That one picture, McDonald's has fallen.
Yeah, McDonald's has fallen. Or, you know, I just find it incredible that people are willing to put their lives on the line, you know, for material, for property at the end of the day. Like that one woman in the wheelchair who was stabbing people in a Target.
Yeah. And she's like, and she could walk anyway.
Yeah.
But she's like, I was just peacefully protesting in the doorway of Target, stabbing black people. Because that's not a crime. The Minneapolis Police Department.
Like, is that really the hill that you want to die on?
Well, apparently. It's Target. It's a pillar of the gentrified community.
The gentrified community. Yep.
Yeah. So after all the troops came back, America had all this gas that they had nothing to do with. And they're like, well, the lefties are rising up, and we can't let that happen. So the Chemical Warfare Division of the Army developed the first tear gas grenade and used it to suppress those labor strikes. So the first use of tear gas in America was used to repress the labor movement and repress leftists. And the first like co-opting of, I guess, police repression, at least in a modern sense, was to repress the labor movements of the Red Hot Summer. Then going further, like into the Black Panthers, was like the first SWAT raid, and the first invention of the SWAT or the SWAT team was in like 1969 in L.A. to attack the Black Panthers.
Fred Hampton,
headquarters, and Fred Hampton too. They happened, and that happened within the same, I think, week. They just launched a massive
police raid against the Black Panthers
across the country.
You know, which if you don't know about the Black Panthers, you know, they're one of my favorite subjects to talk about in American history because it really was one of the first sort of minority defense groups. And they were probably one of the most iconic, both in terms and long lasting in terms of their legacy, leftist groups within America. And these people, you know, oftentimes their actual political message gets diluted and it just comes down to black people armed with guns defending themselves. People really forget that they were Maoists. They really read their theory. They were hardcore communists.
Do they have ties with the Chinese government?
Huey Newton, I believe, went to China. He was a national hero there in China. They loved him. You know, they were, I believe the quote that Huey Lewis always used to say was that they would sell weed to hippies on college campuses to get money to buy guns and they would sell weed to get money to buy Little Red books, and they would sell the Little Red books to get the money to buy guns.
Incredible. And they like developed a whole network of like community services.
Yeah, you know, their legacy to this day is still, you know, just as prevalent as it was before, which is why there are so many copycat groups nowadays.
Yeah,
that try to sort of piggyback off of their image.
I mean, even in California, gun rights.
Yeah.
Like the NRA initially was a little more progressive, wasn't it? And as soon as the Black Panthers started arming themselves, they're like, "Oh, time to start banning guns."
Yeah. Yeah.
There goes
People
your
forget
assault
that,
rifle.
I was somewhere looking at those pictures of the Black Panthers just walking right into the California State Capitol building, armed with guns.
Yeah.
And they just
They
walked
had
around.
shootouts in like courthouses.
Yeah. And, they would protest, the rigged court system by simply acknowledging that, using their rights as well. They had a gun in one hand and a law book in the other, and they would simply say things like, if the law is not, we did not receive a fair and equal trial, so therefore the judgment does not count, and we refuse to be punished by that. And I thought those things were incredibly powerful, and that's why they scared the police and the government so much.
Yeah. Well, also they started taking the place of the government. Started
power.
building dual power. Yeah, and
Especially within their
communalizing the
communities.
Black community.
Yeah, through their food program.
Yeah. If you look at the picture though, like you see the cops and pointing his gun. It says the sign says "Feed hungry children."
Yeah.
Free breakfast. That's why they just raided the Black Panther headquarters, was because they were feeding hungry
They were feeding
children.
the hungry. That sounds like socialism to me.
Yeah, that's our job. Or no, it's technically our client's job.
Yeah, exactly. So in 1969, December, that was when the first real SWAT raid, conventional SWAT raid that we think of, was conducted on leftist groups.
Once again, the first or another escalation of militarization of civilian police forces was to repress leftists.
Yeah. And, again, they never do this to right-wing groups, because right-wing groups are inherently conservative, right? They're inherently reactionary, and they inherently don't want things to change. And at the end of the day, the government is always going to, and especially in a capitalist society, is going to be inherently right-wing.
Yeah. I'm going to let you talk. I'm going to go grab another beer.
Okay.
Another one?
Sure. Let's take a quick break then. All right.
No, we keep going your rant.
You sure want to keep going? All right. Well, I'm just going to keep talking then until you get back. But yeah, in this raid, 350 officers went up against, I think, 13 Black Panthers, and they got into an actual shootout. And this shootout pretty much lasted for what, half an hour? Right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Like 4 officers were wounded, a bunch of Black Panthers were wounded, but there weren't any deaths, surprisingly.
Yeah.
They're shooting for the legs, like Joe Biden said.
Yeah, Joe Biden said, why don't you just shoot them towards the legs, son?
Shoot them blacks in their legs.
Yep. Pop, pop, pop.
Corn pop.
Yeah, so that was really the first conventional SWAT raid, right? And it only gets worse from there.
Yeah.
Because at least back then, the SWAT people, they weren't armed to the teeth. They didn't have, what we imagine SWAT teams to have today.
Well, he's got an AR in the picture.
Yeah, but I mean, anybody can just get an AR. It's not like today they have tanks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so they kind of formed that unit as a special raid against the Black Panthers because they knew they were armed, so they had to get everyone with the most tactical training, a bunch of veterans, and have them assault the position. But, yeah, I think back then, like, you could just straight up buy a machine gun. Like,
Yeah,
in a
you
catalog.
could.
I mean, you still can, but you got to be a cop.
Yeah. Well, actually, how to buy those, we'll go into later.
Yeah.
And this goes on, until basically the Black Panthers are destroyed. And then after that, really leftism fell asleep in the 80s and 90s.
At least in America.
Yeah, and everything we're talking about in context of America, with Glasnost and everything, leftism really fell asleep in America.
It kicked off in Colombia, though.
Yeah,
and,
Colombia.
the CIA caught a little drug habit.
Yeah.
A little bit of that cocaine.
And then in order to make sure that the Black Panthers never come back and the Black community is permanently disabled, the CIA introduces meth and heroin.
Yeah, they kind of co-opt the drug trade and work with organized criminals and organized crime. Well, they have for a while. That's who killed JFK.
Yeah.
Was the mafia hired by the CIA? Probably. Maybe.
Probably. Allegedly.
That's what Castro says. I believe Castro more than the U.S. intelligence services.
Wow. No shit. So yeah, that happens. Then that's what led to the drug wars in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, and then the CIA would just bomb rainforests in Colombia to kill all the competing cocaine growers, and then export that cocaine to generate funds for like to sell weapons to the far right militias in Guatemala and Nicaragua. And,
Yep.
Well, the whole South America.
To fund coups to overthrow other leftist governments. You know, it's the ultimate Ponzi scheme. And this goes on for a while. Basically, it's still going on today, and it hasn't solved a single problem.
No, it exacerbated problems, if anything, because then you get to the crack epidemic in black communities. And in order to wrangle the runaway drug rings that the CIA created to repress leftists once again, they had to come up with ways to bolster the police in local communities and kind of really hammer down on law and order on the streets, really.
Yep.
That's where we get to the 1208 National Defense Act program, which is a program that dispersed military equipment for free to local police departments under the context of
loaning it, essentially.
Yeah, but only for the use of combating drugs or fighting the drug war.
Yep.
So, I mean, technically, a de jure war on the streets was started in the 80s and the 90s. And that's, posse comitatus. It's no military forces on U.S. streets. That's in the Constitution, but it doesn't really matter. No one cares about the Constitution.
Yeah. It's a loophole. We're not having the military, but if we just militarize the police.
I mean, we have a military, but the law says they're not a military, so there's no military on the streets.
Yep, exactly. It's a technicality.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to talk about 1033 then?
Yeah, the 1033 program.
Yes, which, 1033 program is basically an agreement between the military and local police forces, or really any government agency, which basically allows the military to loan out surplus weapons that they have. Instead of having to destroy them or sell them back to the market, they can just loan it out to police forces. Which, in the days of, when we weren't at war and we didn't have the surge back in, the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, really didn't mean much. Police might get a couple ARs, whatever. We had soft capped Humvees, so those didn't really matter either.
Yeah.
But now, especially after the post, 2008 surge, suddenly we've got police armed with MRAPs, which is designed to withstand a mine exploding underneath it.
Yeah, and $20,000 night vision goggles. And the thing is, all of this gear is specifically supposed to go to underfunded police departments that cannot necessarily purchase the gear otherwise. So you have all these like rural bumfuck police departments or inner city police departments that don't necessarily have a lot of funds to police like the mass amount of people that they have and the kind of hammer down and oppress the poors. So that's where you see most of this money going, or most of this equipment going, is into these rural, mostly conservative communities, because conservatives don't pay taxes. So where else are they going to get it but from other communities' tax dollars?
Yep.
And through the federal government.
Yeah, and not only that,
Kind of contradiction thing.
yeah, well, that's one big contradiction, which, having conservative communities have the heavily armed police only reinforces that.
Yeah. Socialism, but only for the corporations and the cops.
And the cops, exactly. And not only that, when you have all this gear, you're going to want to use that gear. Because if you use the gear, it's justification to get more of it.
Yeah, exactly. It was in the bylaws that you had to use the gear once a year in order to keep it. Otherwise, you would have to send it back to the government. So there's not only an incentive to acquire gear, but it's also an incentive to use gear.
Yep.
And then, you drive a tank. It's like, fuck yeah, I'm driving a tank.
Yeah.
It's like, why wouldn't you want to drive a tank to your daughter's prom?
Exactly. And what ends up happening is that the more the police use it, the more of it they get. And the more they get, the more they want to use it, which leads us to our current predicament now in America, where, like we said at the beginning of the show, while every single other government agency and organization is struggling for funds to get necessary equipment to protect themselves, the police are the only branch of the government that is still well funded and has everything they need to do their job.
I think like 50% of municipal budgets, up to 80%, in most cases, are dedicated towards the criminal justice system and cops.
Yeah.
So, like prisons and police officers and the sheriff's department.
Yep. And they get, and it's not like they're hurting. Most of them are not hurting for funds. The police get amazing payments, really great, pension plans. They never have to want for equipment because they just get whatever they want. Public opinion for them is at an all-time high still. It's still, they're the only, branch of the government that still gets, is unquestionable, positive media portrayals in the media and TVs and movies.
Yeah.
No one ever makes like a positive TV show about teachers.
Yeah, like you have SWAT.
Yeah, you get SWAT
with that theme song.
You get 1,000 NYPD shows. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that's a whole nother thing is how the federal government invests in movies and the film industry to make these shows. So like Steve Mnuchin is like an executive producer for like American Sniper and Transformers. Like Transformers was funded by the federal government. That's why you have the army in the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, like even the use has skyrocketed since like the initial first wave of the war on drugs, and especially with the 90s when Islamist terrorism was kind of kicking into high gear. Same with white supremacist terrorism, like what's his name, Timothy McVeigh. I mean, I could say, I don't know, were the Branch Davidians white supremacists?
They were. Yeah, I would say they were.
Yeah, they had like one black guy.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that the portrayal of police and the overfunding, right? I think that they're really in today's society, the only form of government that has not been privatized yet. It's teachers, healthcare, really anything you can think about. The wealthy and the bourgeois have a means to purchase for themselves.
Yeah.
But the only job of the police is not to protect lives, is to protect property. And right now, they're still the only branch of the government that can effectively do that. And they're the only organization that can effectively do that, which is why there's still so much support for police in the government, because they're the only branch that the rich still need.
Exactly. That's why you see them barricading Target.
Yeah.
But
which is also ironic. I think it's funny that my friend pointed out to me that in 3 months of quarantine, no Target or Walmart ever closed.
yeah,
It was only when the rioting started that they closed down, right? They're more interested in protecting their property than they are in protecting the lives of their workers. Which, if
you even see all the corporations co-opting Black Lives Matter now. It's like, we fucked up. Like like Lamborghini will put like a blackout picture. We fucked up. We're sorry, black people.
yeah, we're sorry. Or I think
And
they
like an intricate design,
yeah, or the black box that they do, which is also funny because I remember seeing like Bethesda and Bethesda America, Bethesda France, Germany, all those black or black lives, black boxes. In Russia, nothing, right? It's just regular Bethesda. Oh no, it was for Gay Pride Month. Rainbow flags everywhere except for Bethesda Russia, Bethesda Saudi Arabia, countries that they don't want to piss off. Nope, no gay pride flags for you.
Cops are still putting up gay pride flags still.
Yeah, cops are still doing that as well.
So back to the war on drugs. After it kicked into the war on terror, we kind of saw this expansion of the executive powers of not even like the executive government and the federal government, but also local governments. So I think it's like SWAT raids increased 1,000 or 2,000% from 1990 to 2005, and it's probably a lot more now since 2005.
Yeah.
Like who's even tracking? But now it's like no knock raids for literally everything. Like back in the day, it was no knock raids were only done when you had justification for it, and it was more stringent, at least with the courts, and the judges had to sign off on these no knock warrants that the sheriffs brought to them. But now, since the war on terror, everyone's so on edge, and everyone's just like such a weak beta. Yeah, weak cuck. The sheriff comes up and is like, he has drugs. He might be a terrorist. There's some evidence, but I don't know where it is right now. It's confidential. It's a state secret. And they're just like, okay,
giving it to you.
No knock raid. Go do your thing. And for every little justification they use overwhelming force, because that's another implementation of military tactics. And part of the militarization of the police is not only the equipment, but the tactics and the actual way they operate. So overwhelming force, highly standardized training, and initially a goal and an objective to suppress and not necessarily support, which is what, if you kind of think about it, like that's what your old timey good cop notion of the cops or police are, is, it's your local friendly guy in the corner,
the community guy,
walking your daughter across the street,
yeah, the guy who grew up in the neighborhood and knows the people in it.
But if we're thinking of like white suburbia,
yeah,
it's the guy who's there always at like the community meetings, hanging out with people. I know this one show from the 60s. I forget what it's called, like Sheriff Dick or something. But the one episode was about like the two deputies getting stuck in a snowstorm in some like lady's house they knew, and she's about to give birth, so they birth the baby. It's like a comedy, so it's like the Three Stooges, but they're two cops. And the whole point of the show was like, oh, look how goofy and friendly these cops are, and that's not the way they operate now. They operate as a paramilitary force.
Yep.
And that's the way their tactics run, and just their whole operation is to act as a suppressive, overwhelming force against people that threaten the status quo.
And they even do it, and they'll use any opportunity to use their tactics. As an example recently of Breonna Taylor, honestly.
Yeah.
The SWAT team was trying to arrest somebody with an arrest warrant who had already been arrested. And they went into the wrong house. They had the completely wrong people in there. Plainclothes cops come in, and, obviously if I'm in my house, a bunch of plainclothes people burst into my house in the middle of the night, I'm going to assume they're robbers.
Yeah.
I'm going to shoot back. So that's what ended up happening. The husband shot back. The police kill. They don't even kill him. They kill his wife, who was sleeping, and then they arrest him for assaulting a police officer.
Yeah, because what is it? Qualified immunity.
Yeah.
Within your duties, you have a certain aspect of use of force.
Yep.
So there's no way you could really charge a cop for using force that's within the nature of his duties. Yep. So going in and shooting up the baddie, he's like, oh, well, yeah, he could do that. That's his job.
Going in, shooting up the wrong people. Oh, well, he thought it was the baddie.
Yeah.
Which is just another aspect of militarization.
Yeah, there's no intent to do crime, so he didn't do any crime. It's collateral damage.
Exactly. It's the same thing in the military, right? It's just why you get so many like civilian deaths in war. Oftentimes the soldiers, the civilian's just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Soldier just shoots him up because he thinks that he's a bad guy. It's the same thing.
Of course, like the occupation of Iraq is 100% a war crime, but still different circumstances where it's still an offensive operation. It's not your local cop.
No, it is not. It's occupying a foreign country, and basically the army acted as the police force.
Under the notion of being at war, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Huge contradiction. But, like, when they issue these no-knock warrants, there's always this notion of risk, and it's all about risk management. So when the sheriff brings the request for a warrant to the judge has to say, okay, well, this is a high risk operation. Like, oh, well, you're raiding a drug den, so these guys might have weapons, or you're providing support for civil unrest or suppressing civil unrest. People might have guns. People might want to kill the cops. So you have an authorization for the use of force for these high risk operations. But as time goes on and the war on terror goes on, and the status quo is threatened and it approaches a higher and more apparent precarity and cliff, the use of force and the notion of risk also increases.
Yep.
So as the precariousness of the status quo comes along, the judges say, oh, well, that's definitely a terrorist. That's definitely a drug dealer.
Yep.
You do your thing and you
Protect America.
protect America, kill the bad
God
guys.
bless you for your service. Thank you.
Protecting freedom.
Let me lick your boot while you're at it.
10 out of 10. I'm getting into the leather tasting industry. That one meme with the what's his name, Danny DeVito. He's like, so anyway, I started licking.
I started licking. Yeah, and things that back in the day wouldn't have been warrants or would not have warranted a raid are now just commonplace things. They'll use any justification to do it.
Yeah, so that's why you see cops having tanks.
Yeah. But I guess the question now then is we just spent the last 40 minutes or so going over how shitty the cops are. What can we do, right? I mean, all of these protests happening in America right now. What is the solution, right? I've got a couple of ideas of my own, but I wanted to hear if you have anything. See if there's anything different from mine.
Well, it's getting hot in here.
Yeah? You want to take a quick break?
Yeah.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to go cool off our heads.
Well, I'll just cut it.
All right.
Yeah,
And we're back.
Oh, clap.
Ba, ba, ba. All right, we're good.
Yeah, so,
You
tell a funny joke.
All right. Why did the cop cross the street?
To get shot.
No, there was a black man jaywalking.
I want to download TikTok again just to make one video. And I want to record the Chicago police scanners. Like when an officer went down from like a brick being thrown at his head. It's like, officer down, and then flip the camera around back to me, and I'm wearing a party hat with the officer down, like meme behind it, like there's a star in the balloons, and just have like a little party popper and go
Celebrate good
no, and
times.
just go whee with the party,
Yeah, a little streamer thingy.
and then blow off like a party bomb, like pew, officer down.
Perfect.
Wear a party hat.
Yeah. So we're talking about the increasing militarization of the police, right? I actually want to talk about one thing, which is that one of the reasons that no-knock raids have increased is that the police unions are so strong. And they have so much political power nowadays that judges are actually worried. Judges and what's in the law enforcement? What are they called? In the lawyers.
Prosecutors.
The prosecutors now all work together with the police, and they're in one part because they work their colleagues, and other part because they're afraid of the police unions. And you made a really good comment about the police unions earlier, the FOP.
Yeah, the Fraternal Order of Police.
Yeah, why don't you tell me something about them?
Well, yeah, they all think like they're under siege because like the more like military equipment you get, the more you think of yourself as a paramilitary force, and so any criticism is not genuine criticism. Any criticism is a threat, an attack. Yeah, so you think of yourself as being under siege, and technically, like you think about the precinct in Minneapolis, they were under siege, and then they evacuated, which was awesome. It's like do it again, every city.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, as they stop thinking of themselves as protecting the community and instead as defending themselves from the community.
Like the next picture with this MRAP, like they're operating like they're in Iraq, hiding behind the MRAP. Even in DC. I was watching some stream, and the protesters broke off from this one video journalist, and he just records a hunter-killer squad passing by. And you know how in like military tactics, you have hunter-killer squads where you have one, like maybe a helicopter or one like mobile infantry unit harass the enemy and provide an opportunity and a predicament for the or provide a predicament to the enemy to react, and then the killer squad flanks them and comes around and mobilizes on that opportunity to engage that unit or that opposing force and kill it. And so you have the riot cops up front against the group of protesters, and then 2 paddy wagons and a squad car and MPD or Metropolitan Police Department and Park Police forces behind them, walking with tear gas launchers and pepper balls, and some with live guns too, along in like a flying V, something like walking down the streets,
Arrow formation.
An arrow formation, walking down the streets, like clearing the streets out. It was insane. And that's how they they operate like it's Iraq. And even Chuck Canterbury, the Fraternal Order of Police president, the guy in charge of the police union, says like he gives justification for these military tactics and military equipment, that a mass shooting can happen anywhere. Like you look at Las Vegas, you look at where else? Orlando, pretty much any big city.
Yep.
It's like mass shooting there. There can be literally a terrorist around the corner. Like, look right here. I could have a gun. I have a gun right here, and I could shoot you all right now. There's could be a mass shooting right here. There's going to be a mass shooting right here. You just watch. I will shoot all of you to prove my point. We're all going to fucking die. There's a terrorist around the corner, and this is why we need those guns. We are under siege. We are under threat. We got to protect America from these damn Jewish Bolsheviks and destroy the leftists trying to destroy America. And like,
hey, you can't say Jews anymore. Nowadays, it's Antifa,
Oh, yeah, Antifa.
who is just funded by Jews.
Yeah, by George Soros.
The
Jewish Antifa threat.
God, I wish I could get funded by George Soros.
I know. Like,
we could finally get some new equipment, so we're not recording on a fucking piece of plywood.
Yeah, right. Hey, George Soros, just calling it out there. Yeah, this yeah, like these MRAPs are then using this military equipment. It's insane. And like you cops can just like find this equipment anywhere. So like we talked about the 1033 program, which dispersed military equipment to these police forces. So like in this slide, you see these guys in their ODs. They're kind of chunky.
Yeah, they're really fat.
Olive drab.
What's it with policemen and being fat?
Yeah, and why is he wearing... Wait, one of them's wearing a gas mask. No, all 3 of them are wearing gas masks. And I think this was in response to someone shooting fireworks off. Somewhere in bumfuck Wisconsin. Like, somewhere in the middle of the suburbs. And they call in an MRAP. Oh, wait, and then you see the regular cop on the side to the right. He's just wearing his blues and standing there with his arms crossed, like, just pulling traffic, go around the tank, please. And then you have these three fat fuds, pointing the one dude has an ACOG on the barrel. Is that how you should mount your optics on your gun?
Not really. You really should not be putting it there.
Like he's even looking down the optics. Like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And this tank is like twice as tall as them.
Yeah. Well, you know what?
And this was for one dude too. Even like
some dumb kid lighting off fireworks.
Yeah,
in his
and all these
neighborhood.
no-knock raids and this massive amount of force. Like I think before, I don't know if I was talking about this on the podcast, but like in Florida in 2005, there was one instance where in Orange County, sheriffs raided a barbershop because they're like, oh, well, they're selling drugs and PCP out of the barbershops. Because you know what that liquid in the sanitation liquid is.
Yeah,
it's
you never
PCP, And 34 people from like a bunch of barbershops were taken in for barbering without a license. You need your license to barber.
You got your license there.
Your license, we're going to send a tank through your front door.
Yeah. Anyway, so, with all this bullshit going on, police unions, everything about this is fucked up, right?
Yeah, but look at... I mean, it's fucked up, but there's not much we could do to stop it because the 1033 program was meant to supply underfunded police units, right? Now police units have the funds to buy equipment, and they just go to the primary source. There's like the 1033 program isn't that prevalent anymore in the war on terror and drugs. Now police can just go like online, like their own little private Amazons, and buy this equipment. And you don't even need the federal government to disperse this equipment to you. They can go to the Department of Homeland Security and apply for grants to get money to buy this equipment from these private industries. So what you're saying before is how the police are like the only part of the government that's not privatized. That's partially true, because now the procurement of equipment is privatized. And now we're seeing, at least in Katrina, Blackwater was pulling security because the cops were too busy rounding up people to shoot on the bridges.
Yeah. Although, what I said was in terms of privatization is that there's not really an alternative, a system-wide alternative to the police force right now.
Yeah, just procurement's privatized. Like,
yes. Well, I mean, that's always been privatized in every government. They always push off the procurement of goods to a third-party company.
Well, even in with like Northrop and the whole history of the American military is privatized. But if we go to the next slide, you could check out the Lenco armored vehicles.
Yeah,
it's the one-stop shop for your military police
police equipment.
Like
honestly, I'm looking at this one. I think my favorite, what I want, is the Firecat.
I like that.
It's literally just an up-armored Humvee. It looks exactly like it, except it's in black. See, because everything's got to be in black.
The anti-riot's cool because I could see myself going to Walmart in that and getting some supplies and hunkering down with some camping equipment, maybe some cat food.
Yeah.
But I think my ultimate favorite is
I like the border security.
Yeah, the Bearcat X3 with the border security trim,
optional with the machine gun mount on the top,
optional accessories, M2 machine gun, and a mobile ground radar surveillance.
Yes, because I need an M240 machine gun to protect my borders, the borders of my property, of my shitty apartment.
Well, no, you have to be an LEO or a law enforcement official to get this kind of shit, because they say on their website, to protect the security of our customers, all product information and brochures are password protected and only available to law enforcement and government personnel. It's like, okay, well, your own little. It's like you're going down to the Mazda dealership.
Your private membership.
Yeah, like you could see like this one's used. The next slide, it's the one right above it on the dock.
Yep.
It's a regular old Bearcat, but it's used, and you can go in and say, oh, well, I want to check out some used Bearcats today. It's like you're going down to the Mazda dealership to get a new car.
Although I think it's even more fucked up is the next slide. If you go over here to the fucking grenades that you can buy, the chemical agent devices.
Oh, yeah. Well, hold on. Let's go back. I just want to look at the highlights. It's like you go to buy a car. It's like, Bluetooth stereo.
Yeah. Learn more.
Performance trim, like you get a turbo. This one's just like V8 turbo diesel 4x4. Optional accessories, standard vehicle and U.S. SWAT, all steel armor construction, enhanced off-road performance. The increased ground clearance and robust suspension allows for emergency response in rural regions. The G3 will get you where you need to go. Stop down to your local Lenco dealership and buy today. So you're going to shop for a huge tank, right? And then you go down to like defense technology, right? This one, like you could just cops just show up and like, hey, I want to go shopping for some tear gas grenades today. Let's see what's in stock. You can get the triple chaser separating
I'm
canister.
a big fan of the triple chaser. It sounds like, those honestly sound like cocktails that you can order at like a beachside bar. Give me a triple chaser. It's just it's a shot of tequila, rum, and vodka.
I like how they sensationalize it with like handball, like it's some Instagram post, like handball grenade. And it's a sting. Yeah. It's a sting bomb with little rubber pellets that shoot out and sting everyone around it and explode. And
I've been hit with
the tear gas. Yeah, those are fun. What is it?
Speed Instantaneous heat. Blast OC grenade. Ooh.
I like the speed heat, continuous discharge, chemical grenade, CS.
God, those
it's like, yeah.
suck. Okay.
It's like pick your poison.
Yeah, I mean,
and like we see like going on to the next slide. Check out these motherfuckers. Just most of these guys are just pulled off the street. Like most cops, like you think who wants to be a cop? It's just like high school and college dropouts and who go through 8 weeks of training and aren't necessarily trained like military personnel are.
Yep.
And like this guy on the left,
The fatty
like
with
this,
the heat.
yeah, this chunky guy. He's got a heat patch on him. Like I don't know what unit that is. It says law enforcement officer heat.
They don't have all those patches they're like Girl Scout patches, right? If we're like, I feel like wearing this. It's like when they wear the fucking Punisher patches on their fucking vests, which is a whole thing of it itself, which how fucked up it is. Mm-hmm. But we can go into that. But
new fascism.
Yeah, Heat is from that movie about the bank robbers who go into a shootout and slaughter a bunch of cops.
Yeah, and the cops are heroic at the end of the day because they finally kill Robert De Niro.
Oh, see, I always get to the gunfire. I get to the firefight, and then I stop watching the movie.
It's like one of the best heist movies ever. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to watch a movie and just be like, yeah, that's a cool movie.
I just like the part where they shoot cops.
Yeah, same. But then the cops shoot civilians. I'm like, oh, that's sad.
I mean, I like that part because it makes the cops look bad.
True. And then there's that one scene where they're sitting in a diner and De Niro and Pacino are talking, and they're finally face to face, the baddie and the goodie, and they're two different worldviews. They're two parts of the contradiction of the American consciousness are finally meeting. And Robert De Niro's like, I'm not about your life. And it's like Al Pacino's like, what's that? Killing and robbing?
No, the barbecues and baseball games.
And Pacino's like, yeah. Then they leave.
Yeah.
Pacino chases them down. They have the last standoff. And Pacino's like, it's the end of the road for you. And Pacino's like, or no, De Niro's like, yeah,
I know.
And then boom, shoot. Right before De Niro's like, do I go to my woman? Or do I stand against the one terror I've been fighting against my entire life? Ah! Written and directed by Martin Scorsese. I think. I don't know. It's Pacino and De Niro. It's probably a Scorsese film. I'm not going to look that up though. I don't feel like it. But yeah, you just have these motherfuckers, high school dropouts. Like how do you even? It's like self-perpetuating. Mm-hmm. The cops have so much power and so much control over just how our laws are enacted, and the courts agree with the cops. They enforce qualified immunity all the way up to the Supreme Court. Congress keeps passing these authorization for the use of force and disperses all that high-tech gear like the Stingrays that track your cell phone, and also share information with local police departments about possible terrorists posting on Facebook. And that's why you get a call from your local police department for posting some edgy memes on Twitter, which hopefully I don't soon.
Yeah.
I should probably delete my Twitter.
Or just delete it. Fuck it. I mean, so let's go over to, we talked about all these negative things for over an hour. Let's go over what can we do, right? I think that the recent protests, at the very least...
Or the uprising, really.
Yeah, the uprisings. If they don't achieve anything else, they raise to the public's awareness just how brutal the police are, right? First, we need to change the public mindset of what police are, right? And I think that
Well, it's kind of changed, like, the common sense of the people.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, we have this collective struggle against the police. It's kind of solidified everything, which is what makes this uprising so much different than, say, the Red Summer or even the Long Hot Summer of 1968, is that the material conditions of our society and community are wholly different than they were before.
Exactly.
The amount of social capital that people have is...
social power.
And social power, too, is exponentially increased. Yes.
We have only that,
instantaneous communication, instantaneous community, where we can all share in this struggle together, just online.
Yeah, and not only that, the Red Summer, when police were shooting up union workers, you didn't know about that immediately. Nowadays, with social media,
the papers were repressed.
Police push over an 85-year-old man and give him a seizure.
5
people
minutes later.
instantly know
5
about
minutes
that.
later.
Exactly, and it's on the news.
Within one day.
Yep.
There was tear gas in Minneapolis. 2 days later, right after the day after the precinct burnt down, everyone realized we can do that.
Yeah,
And all of
we
a
can just
sudden,
do that.
the conscience was elevated.
Exactly.
Of every American.
Exactly. And I think, the Red Summer, the union workers weren't fighting against the police. They were fighting for better work, wages, and conditions. This is a direct protest against police brutality. And the fact that the police are reacting with more police brutality, which is really the only thing they know how to do, is just further inflaming the protests. And I think recently, there are 5 really good points that we need to fight for, right? 5 sort of goals that we need to have in mind for these protests. And I'm just going to list them off now in terms of what I think is the most important, right? First is the full demilitarization of the police, right? We need to basically either defund the police force so they can no longer afford these sort of heavy equipment gear except for highly specialized units, and funnel the funds towards community-based policing, right? By reaching out towards community members and basically stopping the need for the crimes to happen in the first place, right? Like nobody just robs a bank because they want to. Most people don't rob a bank because they just get a kick out of it. They rob a bank because they need money.
Exactly. Right? Like, why do you sell drugs on the street? You need money.
Yeah. If we remove the root cause for committing the crime in the first place, there's no need to have the SWAT team break into his house and shoot his wife later.
Exactly.
Shoot someone else's wife, honestly, later. Second, I think we need more oversight, right? We need to remove the ability for the police to investigate themselves. Police commits a crime, a civilian committee comes in and investigates them.
In Newark, they started approaching it like this. Mayor Baraka, after Cory Booker left, the corporate shill, he instituted these reforms in the police and created the Civilian Oversight Committee. And I think crime went down like 30% in Newark now.
Yeah.
And so did total arrests, which is insane. And it's not like Camden. I see a lot of people on social media promoting the Camden model, but the Camden model was allowing
just a broken window.
It disbanded the police department because the police department was one of the most corrupt in the nation. And Camden was for the good part of the early 2010s, the most crime-ridden city in America, and essentially the worst city, worse than the Detroit was kind of the nickname. Like, you see that map of New Jersey made by that Rutgers professor.
Yeah.
The whole area around Camden is called worse than the Detroit. But their model was disband the police department, allow